Oh, actually, I've been walking around the house singing this all day. I actually did not know that producer McPants was going to open the show with it. So that is the theme from the Avengers, and we will be beginning the nose today with a remembrance and an appreciation for Diana Rigg, who left us this week. A little bit later, we will be talking about some equally canonical women, the Kardashians, who are ending the run of their flagship show. We're not qualified to talk about the Kardashians, but we will, in the spirit of being not qualified. And then we're probably going to be focusing an awful lot of our energies today here on the nose into talking about a movie by Charlie Kaufman, who I frequently and recklessly claim for West Hartford, Connecticut. I think he actually spent 3 years of his life as sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school in West Hartford. But that's good enough. We can claim somebody that way. It's called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Has, if nothing else, just a tremendous cast. And I'm not even 100% sure what our panel is going to be saying about it. I kind of think I know what I'm going to be saying about it. Anyway, all of that is to come. But when I say we and when I say panel and things like that, when I throw these terms around, what do I mean? Well, today I am pleased to say that I mean Rebecca Castellani, who handles social media marketing and event planning for Quiet Corner Communications. She's joining us via the miracle of Skype. And David Edelstein, America's greatest living film critic. So happy to have him on the nose. See, now that the nose is ageographical, we can have anybody we want on the nose. We don't have to actually get them into a studio in Hartford. So, first of all, welcome. And second of all, so Rebecca, when the news about Rebecca is, but a tender green shoot growing. She's the baby Groot of the nose.
Still?
Well, no, Sam Hadelman's younger than you are, but
Sam definitely unseated me recently.
When we saw the Diana Rigg news, I would have assumed, because I also know how you feel about fantasy and stuff like that, that you certainly would have a relationship with Diana Rigg via Game of Thrones. But I was quite surprised to see where you went right away. So tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. So my mom was a huge Avengers fan growing up and actually named 2 kittens that she got, Emma and Steed. And Steed was still alive when I was born and was my first real pet. So I grew up with a deep appreciation for Emma and Steed of the Avengers and watched the show as a kid. And then in middle school, I had a peer who was absolutely obsessed with the Avengers, and we used to dress up and pretend to be them. And she was really into Honor Blackman, and I was super into Diana Rigg, and it was just wonderful. And I was then so tickled when she was cast as Lady Olenna on Game of Thrones, and she just took that role and turned it into everything that it wasn't in the book and chewed up every scene she was in. So I have nothing but warm and fuzzies for Diana Rigg, and I'm sorry she's left us. I also very much enjoyed her in that, Colin shared this in our emails, in the Midsummer Night's Dream 1968 adaptation, which I watched in high school for an English class, and I just think she's delightful.
Really? That's the Peter Hall. David, have you ever seen that? This thing that it's got this incredible
Not only
cast.
have I've seen it about 6 or 7 times.
It's kind of great. It's hokey, obviously, but it's kind of wonderful.
Well, it's, there's this whole tradition. There was a tradition of staging Midsummer Night's Dream with the Mendelssohn music and the sort of romantic Max Reinhardt movie, fairies who are really gossamer. But in fact, the play, when you read it, everything is supposed to be rainy and messed up and muddy and weather. I mean, it's supposed to be kind of global warming as a result of these 2 fairies, Titania and Oberon, fighting. And Peter Hall had definitely created the muddiest Midsummer Night's Dream. And it's very, very funny and messy and slapsticky but beautifully spoken. That's the bottom line. Can you do all that and speak the verse?
Right. So it's first of all, I just want to stick up for, because I'll get an email from him maybe otherwise, Mark Lamos's extremely wet production of Midsummer Night's Dream many years ago. That had a lot of water on the stage. But
Alvin Epstein's Yale one, which had Meryl Streep playing Helena, which Diana Rigg played, was also very messy and rough and discordant, and so that's been the tradition lately.
Right. So anyway, that play, the version that Rebecca was talking about, features Diana Rigg, Helen Mirren, Judi Dench, David Warner, Ian Holm. Who am I leaving out? I mean, it's kind of amazing. And of course, most of them are quite younger and more dewy than we've become, speaking of dampness and moisture, than we have become accustomed to thinking of them.
But also recognizable. Like, yes. I still see Helen Mirren now in all of her original roles, and I still see Diana Rigg. Like, both those women aged so gloriously and were so true to themselves. Like, I don't think by today's beauty standards, either of those women would be celebrities or movie stars.
So, David, setting aside whatever effect Mrs. Peel, Emma Peel, and the Avengers may have had on our 14-year-old selves, there's sort of a weird way in which, I mean, for one thing, when you do a little bit of research, as Rebecca's kind of alluding to, Honor Blackman was in the female role for the first 3 seasons of the Avengers. Diana Rigg stepped in and I think maybe did just 4 and 5. So she wasn't even the most frequently used female sidekick. She didn't wear the cat suit anywhere near as much as people think. In fact, she didn't like the cat suit. It wasn't comfortable, and had fashion designers working on other stuff for her to wear. But there is, I mean, she is iconic. Was it just that we hadn't ever seen anybody quite like her, a character quite like this one?
Well, she was, I mean, you saw her through John Steed's, through Patrick McNee's eyes, right? He was a hail fellow, well-met English men's club chap with a bowler hat that he could bonk people over the head with. And he marveled at her poise and her elegance, her ability to banter with him, her ability to anticipate his needs. She was a male projection, let's face it, but she was always getting away from that. Mm-hmm. And I think what we responded to, apart from the fashion, which I'll get to in a second, she was flip. I guess the word is insouciant, but utterly dedicated. And she had so much more class than anyone she was investigating. And then those cat suits, I think what was really interesting, you look at it from a design perspective, it gave her kind of a boneless quality. She seemed very supple, without a brittle bone in her body, with all the parts sort of flowing into one another. And then those karate chops, it's like they gave it a sharp edge. It went slash across the screen, the fist and the legs. And I think from a geometric perspective, I know this sounds insane, but I think sort of for that combination of that suppleness and those sharp angles and that sharp, witty, that poise, that dialogue, I think she emerged as both an object, and let's face it, she put down a lot of people, but she was also constantly getting bonked over the head and tied up and tied to railroad tracks. But she would always get the upper hand, and then those karate chops would come out again. And I think it was really that combination of her being both an object and then taking control that made her so fascinating to us.
All right. Now that's semiotics. You just heard the semiotics of Emma Peel.
Or drugs, I don't know what.
Right. One of the things that I think we also liked about Mrs. Peel, she was widowed. She often, and she was very accomplished in many fields and was a scientist and a businesswoman and all kinds of other stuff in her backstory. And she often had a tone to her, I think to what both of our panelists are alluding to, as though she almost had someplace else she could conceivably be besides where she was. There were some other interesting things she could also be doing. Anyway, let's hear a little bit of her. I think she's gazing into a crystal ball, but not particularly sincerely right here.
What do you see, Madam Peel?
I see you and I on the scene.
Something lurking in the background?
Yes. It comes closer. I see you attacked by 2 large...
What?
Things.
I dispose of them? I do dispose of them.
No, I do.
So then there's that nice confidence. And Rebecca, when you talk about being a kid and having another, I hesitate to say possibly slightly nerdy friend, geeking out about the Avengers, decades after the fact. But, there's a central truth there too, which is that the Avengers was one of those British products that they did very well that really worked 2 different ways, right? You could take it pretty seriously as an action, adventure, mystery, quasi-espionage kind of thing, and then of course there was a whole other way to read it, which was a spoof of the entire genre. I do remember there was one episode where they were battling some horrible gang who tied people up using old school ties, neckties, and one of them said, well, there are no ties like old school ties. There are a lot of those kinds of jokes in it. But Rebecca, if you're just a kid and you want to see a strong woman character in an action role doing all the things David was just talking about, it's a great way to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's not as kooky as, the parodies like Get Smart or something like that, which I also grew up watching. I was only allowed to watch TV Land, which is why I watched all these shows. But there was something about her that I always related to as being very strong. And yes, she had all that grace and poise, but she also was very uncompromising and unsparing. And you see glimmers of that with what she brought to Lady Helena, like this using the male gaze to make a magnifying glass and burn it all down in her like subtle English way. And she's actually a Yorkshire girl too. Like she's
right.
not got this Queen's English accent in real life. So I think that she brings some of that rough-hewn Yorkshire energy to the roles that she took. And I always thought that she was a very strong female and ahead of her time in the way she portrayed that character. Yes, she was accommodating.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to back up one bit here to say that, if you look at the early episodes of The Avengers, which are available in black and white on video, it was a straight series and there wasn't a woman in it originally. And
it was
Steve
two guys.
was a secondary character. And then Honor Blackman came in and it was still pretty straight. And it was when Diana Rigg came in that they went more pop with it. And, Emma Peel was, they wanted someone with man appeal, M appeal. That was why she was named that. And so she literally was an object when she was brought in. But I think when she was on the show for those seasons, it really did walk this wonderful line between being straight and being camp without ever quite spilling over. And unfortunately, when Diana Rigg left and Linda Thorson came in as Tara King, what you'll see is that the last two seasons were just camp. It just completely lost that edge that it had, that you could possibly take it straight when Diana Rigg was there.
I mean, she's the defining character of the show in my mind. I think if you were to ask somebody on the street that didn't know much about it but was aware of the show, they would say Steed and Emma. They wouldn't say anybody else's name. And I think that's a testament to how strong her portrayal of this character was.
Usually you don't like the new person.
They were playing a game. They were doing a little play together. They were performing with each other. They were.
Well, it's clear she's a Shakespearean actress, even in something that's a little on the campier side. She's got that, restraint and humor and natural timing that I just think that makes her so remarkable.
Well, it is a remarkable career, and it's a career that is pinned to a couple of big franchises on both the early and late ends, but there's a lot else in there. She actually, I think, has had 4 Tony nominations, a lot of work on Broadway, including Mrs. Higgins just a few years ago in the revival of My Fair Lady.
She was Medea. I'm sorry I didn't see her Medea. I fear that she never really, though, in between those two things, found that one role that she, the way Helen Mirren found, actually several times, but beginning with her TV series. What am I called?
She was
Prime Suspect.
Yeah, Jane Tennant.
Jane Tennant. I mean, Diana Rigg never really escaped Mrs. Peel, and I think that's really too bad. I mean, she fronted Masterpiece Theater for a while. She never, I don't know what it is. She never lost her poise in anything, which is what we loved her for, but also may have limited her in the public or in filmgoers' imaginations.
Yeah, I've never watched the Elizabeth Taylor film of A Little Night Music, but I don't think I've watched it all the way through. I'm sure it's pretty awful. But Diana Rigg
she's good though.
Diana Rigg is Charlotte.
The best thing in it.
She was a Bond girl too.
Yeah, she was a Bond girl. Yeah. All right. Well, we have to kind of transition from there, and the transition that I'm going to make is that yes, Diana Rigg's true story is one of being educated at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, often known as RADA, joining the Royal Shakespeare Company, doing extensive work in theater, both in the West End of London and on Broadway and other places as well. A lot of training, a lot of dramatic expertise, a lot of serious craft. The Kardashians, not so much. They too are facing an ending right now, or embracing an ending right now. Their flagship series, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, is coming to an end. I'm sure all the spin-offs will go forever. We will never be Kardashian-less for the rest of human history. But they kind of skipped all the training and went straight for the cat suit, so to speak. So, first of all, I'm going to have Rebecca educate us a little bit, or set the scene, because David, well, you brought it on yourself by admitting to knowing anything about them.
I had to fall on my sword here for the Kardashians.
So, but before I do that, one of the questions you get us started, and then I'll just have to remember to ask this fundamental question. So, basically, give us kind of either a defense or something of the Kardashians.
I mean, I think it's hard to say anything about the Kardashians that people don't already know, whether you watch the show or not. I mean, that is how deeply they've permeated our collective consciousness. I mean, they are everywhere, whether you choose to follow them and keep up with them on the television show or their various social media platforms or endeavors. They make the news all the time, whether it's the controversy, is Kylie Jenner the youngest billionaire? Is she a billionaire at all? What's Kanye up to? What's Kim's going to law school? I mean, they're always penetrating the cultural moment. And I think that is an enormous testament to the momager in chief, Kris Jenner, who has completely changed what reality TV means with the Kardashians. So I'm very much a product of that early millennial, The Hills, The Real World, all of these things being on MTV and VH1. And E! Was kind of just the throwaway, trashy network that you'd kind of watch for red carpet stuff sometimes. And what Kris Jenner did with that show was take, an ordinary life. And these people at the time were not super, super wealthy. They weren't, top tier. They by no means were celebrities. Kim was famous for having a sex tape with Ray J and being Paris Hilton's tag-along bestie and closet organizer. I mean, by no means people worth fame. And Kris Jenner turned the monotony of their somewhat rich lives into a program that has turned into $1 billion empire. And now what started us, the spotlight on Kim, the spotlight has really shifted to the younger Kardashians. So a quick rundown of them. There are 5 central Kardashians: the oldest sister, Kourtney, the middle sister, Kim, who is the most famous, arguably, younger sister, Khloe, and then the 2 youngest daughters that are Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner's children, Kendall and Kylie. And Kendall is a successful model, and Kylie is a beauty guru. And that's really all I have for you, Colin, and I hope it's enough. That
was plenty. I thought was very impressive. Put me in mind, somebody put up a clip on Twitter this week, I guess apropos of this news, of Billy Eichner talking to a woman on the street who's
so good.
Not the one that I sent you, not the Geppetto one, but there's yet another one. And it's a young woman who really does like the Kardashians. And Billy Eichner, being Billy Eichner, can hold up his end of the conversation, and they go through each one, and she talks about why she either does or doesn't like that person, and he asks some follow-up questions, some knowledgeable follow-up questions, and the thing goes on for quite a long time. It's at least 3 minutes long, if not longer, and at the end he says, "Okay, well, thank you for talking to me. I have to go blow my brains out now." But one of the things that it makes me think, David, is, I think you and I would both subscribe to the idea that there's a certain amount of popular culture that you have to imbibe if you are going to fully participate in your civilization. When I discovered that one of my coworkers at WNPR, I think I can even say it, I don't think she would mind, I discovered one day that Chion Wolf had never watched The Godfather, and I said, well, you kind of have to watch the 2 Godfather movies, or you won't understand a lot of things. They provide a certain kind of context and a set of references and things like that. Without them, you sort of miss a whole bunch of other connections that are hard to lay out. Now, the question would be, can the same be said of the Kardashians? Because David and I, or would the Kardashians be an example of a piece of popular culture which you can know enough about in order to maybe understand what they are and what they symbolize without really having sat down and, toiled through a few episodes? And I suppose, David, you and I are in a poor position to answer that question because
Are you talking to me? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am.
You're asking me a question.
I'm asking you sort of, I guess the question is, should you and I watch some Kardashian episodes so we will understand our culture that much better?
Colin, these shows, all of them, they make me really anxious. I don't know why. It's a kind of vertigo. I don't trust what I'm seeing as reality, but I don't trust it as fiction either. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. Like, I feel like Data on Star Trek. It's like, I don't understand this, Captain. Please explain it to me. Why are humans, attracted to this? I did go onto YouTube to watch some of Kim's more iconic, do I use that word? I guess I do. Moments. And there was one where she went into some food store or ice cream store, and there were paparazzi outside clicking, and she was complaining to these friends of hers about the lack of privacy everywhere she goes. And meanwhile, obviously she was leading her camera crew in there, and they were photographing her, and she was just talking about what it's like. You can't get away from them. You're always being photographed. They're always going to be saying these things. And I'm sorry, on my brain, I just couldn't process it. There were too many. You have to be Charlie Kaufman, I think, or something, to figure out what's going on there between truth and fiction.
So, Rebecca, I heard a little exclamation of yours, and I want to make sure that I understood it. Were you maybe saying that the show kind of exists as a thumb that runs itself down that knife edge between reality and fiction, where you really can't commit? Say a little bit more about that, then.
Yeah, so you have your two classes of reality shows. You have stuff like The Real World, which was, you really did get the impression that these people were living and breathing in the same space and reacting in real time as people would. And that was kind of the model at the beginning. Survivor, you think of these shows that have scripted elements but are really people's reactions. Big Brother's another one like that you could classify. But what Kris Jenner did was kind of took that and created buzz. So every time there was something that could ruin the Kardashians' careers, arguably a sex tape could ruin your career before it even began, in Kim's case. And Kris found a storyline in that and turned it into something that would have viewers coming back every single week to keep up with this family. And the way that she kept interest was by, it's creative nonfiction. She was taking elements from their lives and mining them for views. And she was doing this before we really had an understanding of content and how to manipulate viewers.
Wait. Let me ask you a question. That's really interesting. So did she put us, while simultaneously we were salaciously wanting to see her sex tape? I'm using in the royal we. She put us on her side, trying to suppress the tape and trying to manage the scandal.
Well, so she never even really suppressed
and outside.
It. Yep, and that's what they've done consistently. When Kylie Jenner got pregnant, Kylie didn't want anyone to know she was pregnant, so they kept it completely under wraps. And then when it was finally announced, the circus around it, and that was all Kris. Kris knows exactly how to spin a story to get people wanting more and using their real life. And that's where it very much is. I think everything that happens to them like this is real. It's a lived experience. And yet Kris is mining it in a way that gets people coming back for more. I would argue that Kris Jenner is one of the smartest businesswomen in this country.
I think that was one of the smartest. That may have been one of the smartest Kardashian conversations you'll hear all week. But
wait, let me ask one final question.
Sure. David, you're hooked now. Yeah. You keep up with the Kardashians.
Like, I was just thinking about those paps outside the window. Are we? Yeah. We feel it makes us feel contempt and superior to those paps because we get to go into that store with them.
Yep.
So we are
with
brought
him,
into
and we get to feel that irritation that. Yes. And that's what they did. And it makes this mega wealthy world in Calabasas that many of us will never experience. It made it accessible. It made you feel like you were a Kardashian too. Lots of people will say that, I watch them because they feel like my family, even though the people that are watching this show are not living in billion-dollar homes in Calabasas. She made being wealthy and being vapid accessible in a way that people are addicted to. It is an addiction to the Kardashians. They're everywhere. And once you start realizing how much they've permeated everything, you will see and hear memes. They've invented words that have become part of, the general discourse. It's remarkable.
All right,
in a very different way than Diana Rigg is remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no disagreement there. So we have to go to a break here pretty soon. I just want to quickly say this is sort of part of my mission to get everybody in the world to watch The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, that this is another subject that Tina Fey has had a lot of fun with. One of Kimmy's early boyfriends is a Vietnamese undocumented immigrant who has learned English partly by watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So every once in a while, this young Vietnamese man will turn and say, well, it's just like last night when Chloe was being such a bitch.
Bible.
And then towards the end, in their more recent interactive special, there was a little throwaway joke among the other 1,000 throwaway jokes where Titus says that he can't walk in the shoes that he's wearing because they're a special brand that was designed by Kanye West to wear when he's upstairs trying not to make any noise while they're filming Keeping Up with the Kardashians down below.
That's what his shoes look like.
So anyway, we have to take a break right here. We're going to come back. We're going to talk to you about this movie that you can see this weekend.
Morning. Never thought I'd see the light again.
I'm thinking of ending things.
Huh?
What?
Did you say something?
No, I don't think so.
Weird.
Yeah. I think of ending things. What's the point in carrying on like this? I know what it is, where it's going. Jake is a nice guy, but it's not going anywhere. I've known this for a while now. Maybe it's human nature to keep going in the face of this knowledge. The alternative requires too much energy, decisiveness. People stay in unhealthy relationships because it's easier. Basic physics. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. People tend to stay in relationships past their expiration date. It's Newton's first law of motion.
Do you want to stop for a coffee or something? A snack? It's going to get pretty farmy pretty fast now.
I'm fine.
You sure?
Mm-hmm. Don't want to spoil my appetite.
Okay.
All right, you're hearing the voices of the two leads of I'm Thinking of Ending Things. This is the first movie ever released with two leads named Jessie. I'm making up that statistic. I don't know if it's really true or not, but you're hearing Jessie Buckley, otherwise known as Carolyn Payne's body double, and you're
they
hearing,
do look alike.
Oh, it's disconcerting. And Jesse Plemons as the male lead. This is a very difficult movie to set up. Let me just see if I can do that in some way. The sounds you hear are of windshield wiper blades. This is a movie, much of which takes place inside a car, but not all of which takes place inside a car. The premise, more or less, at the outset anyway, is that a couple, a relatively newly formed couple, 6 or 7 weeks into their relationship, are taking a drive just out for the evening to have dinner with the male member of the couple's parents at the old farm. However, things don't really stay on that path. They do get there. They meet the parents, hilariously incarnated by Toni Collette and David Thewlis, but things after that begin to lose their moorings in time, in space, in even consistency of persona, and we're off on a very, very different kind of trip. So this is all the brainchild of Charlie Kaufman. As I said at the outset of the movie of this show, he has a very exciting oeuvre as a screenwriter, with Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Synecdoche, New York, and he has directed several of the movies that I just mentioned as well. This would be, I think, his third full directorial effort. And in addition to which, he used to be in a carpool with David Edelstein. So I think we have to get that out of the way right away.
Well, hang on. I thought we carpooled to Hebrew school.
Yeah.
But now, as I was thinking back, it might have been drama school or something at the Hartford Stage Company.
Mm-hmm.
Or that might not have been him. It might have been me. No,
Right.
I think it was him. But I see him short with a kind of afro. I guess a Jufro is what you call it. And I see him, receding into the distance, and then I see him aging, and then I see him getting senile, and then I see him, bounding around drama class. But I know they knew him at Hall High. And I bet people are listening right now who were classmates of his. I know, interestingly, he played the Woody Allen part and played Against Sam.
Right.
That's interesting because I think of him as Woody Allen 2.0 or Woody Allen squared, because you go from Freud to Jung to Pirandello to Einstein. Woody Allen never made the world an extension of his solipsistic self. When he got serious, he borrowed from Bergman or Fellini or Tennessee Williams. But Charlie Kaufman travels back and forth through time and space. Identities mutate and blur. It's all one vertiginous consciousness, and there is this one lonely soul trapped in it crying out. Yes, I think it was drama school. Now that I think.
All right. The point is, riding around in a car with Charlie Kaufman has become somewhat cooler than it was, a couple of weeks ago. So, Rebecca, I think I have no idea what you thought of this movie. So tell me what you thought of this movie.
I don't know if I know what I thought about this movie. I really liked it. I can say that. I was deeply confused by it, and I was deeply disoriented. It was uncanny. Confusing. I've said that. There were moments where I felt like it was just an exercise in like grad school pretension, and there were other moments where I felt like it was a really wonderful depiction of the mind that is ill. It's hard to talk about without spoiling it, so I'm trying to be very careful here with the words I choose. But I guess my best summation of my feeling is disoriented by it. It's one of those movies that the minute I stopped watching it, I actually needed to take a complete break from it. And then I watched the end of it again this morning, and it's haunting me a little bit. It definitely feels sticky and like it's changing some alchemy inside me. And I don't really have like a hard line for you. I don't have anything intelligent or succinct, because in a way I think the movie works to subvert any expectation you have of it or any sort of review one could write on it. So the reviews I've read in it are similarly kind of struggle to capture the essence of what this film does to you. I guess I felt very similarly to how I felt at the end of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and sort of Anomalisa in a way. And Anomalisa really messed me up for weeks after I watched that movie. So I think that's kind of a Kaufman hallmark. But yeah, I'm curious to see what you guys thought about it, whether you're as confused as I am.
I think, first of all, a lot of the things that you said are really terrific and kind of fascinating about it. And that idea of subverting whatever premise it sets up at any given moment, it is prepared to pull the rug out from under that premise.
Yeah.
And so, David, initially, for example, and this won't spoil, we're going to not spoil anything. We've sort of pledged not to do that. But, early on. Well, you didn't actually, that's true. But there's sort of like a nice little kind of setup and a joke. So they're this couple, and they really don't know each other that well, but they've been dating for a while. And she seems to have all kinds of different skill sets and pending careers. But at one point he says that he enjoys her poetry. Has she written anything? And she says yes. And he begs her to recite it. And it's actually turns out to be a poem by somebody else. But anyway, it's a poem that goes on really, really a long time and is really, really kind of grim and hopeless about life. And then at the end he goes, I just feel like that's about me. But I mean, to me, that could happen in a Woody Allen movie. That scene could happen in a Woody Allen movie, David. It's just that Charlie Kaufman is not going to stay on that particular platform. He's going to leap to 9 other platforms in a very short time.
Well, in anticipation of this discussion, I actually read the book by Iain Reid, the novel, and in some ways, we're talking about it as if it sprung whole from Charlie Kaufman's Jufro, but it didn't. I mean, it's quite faithful in some ways to the book. But you know how a filmmaker will come along and pare down a novel, cut the digressions, cut some of the extraneous philosophizing. Charlie Kaufman has embellished the novel and added philosophizing and added digressions. And at one point,
and removed action, like the plot of the book.
At one point, he even the female character, and I can spoil it because everybody knows. At one point, the female character literally almost literally not literally, but metaphorically transforms into Pauline Kael, smoking a cigarette in his car, and recites a review from memory of John Cassavetes' movie A Woman Under the Influence, which Charlie Kaufman adores and Pauline Kael disliked. And so it becomes, in that moment, a dialogue between Charlie Kaufman and a Charlie Kaufman critic. Now, one could say, does this have anything to do with the actual emotional thrust of the story? And the answer is it does, but there's throwing up a lot of flack. There's a lot of fuzz being thrown up. And I feel like on some level, I actually have finally figured out what everything in it means. And I feel like I'm probably one of 10 people who has. Right. And that the movie really, I could understand someone loathing this movie, just finding it inert and really irritating. And it actually makes great sense. Whether or not it works, I don't know. I love it, but I don't love the ending at all. I love it.
Oh, I love the ending.
Oh, really? Well,
yeah.
Yeah, we can't really talk about it.
No, can't talk about it.
No.
Yeah. But in any case, I love the way Charlie Kaufman, that there are no walls in his technique, in either his film technique or in his writing. Walls are illusory, they melt away. He can take 2 or 3 points of behavior in a character and extrapolate until the end of time. And he does. He goes to the end of time, or the end of a life.
I do want to reach out and say something nice about the actors here. I mean, who are, I think, all really, really good. And I'm kind of a Jessie Buckley fan already, which I'll mention during the endorsements. But I mean, I really think that whatever the scenes involving David Thewlis and Toni Collette look like on the page, they just take that stuff and just crank it. I mean, this is a weird and at times kind of scary and disconcerting segment of the movie, but it's also really, really funny. I mean, if you're not going to laugh at them, you're probably not going to laugh at anything in the movie. You know, Rebecca, one thing I wanted to ask you, because it's a feeling that I was aware of when the movie was over, and you don't want to make everything kind of, you should pardon the expression, on the nose about the moment that we're in. But even though there are a couple of conversations about viruses and whether viruses just want what everybody else wants, which is to kind of go on living and continue to be themselves. But, you know, there's a way in which this is a reality, a dream, a nightmare, a something that you can't get out of. You can't step out of. There's no out of this. The characters don't really have someplace else that they can go. And I think that's very much the way we feel too, that, you know, everything that we've lived through over the last 6 months is just sort of maybe I'll just get away from this by going to Cape Cod or Ireland no, you can't go anywhere else. And I don't know if I'm articulating this very well, but as I finished the movie and then walked my dog afterwards, I thought, yes, it really is like I'm in somebody else's all-encompassing dream from which there's no exit.
Fever dream, yeah. Well, as she says, the female character, and her name is Lucy, but she's credited only as young woman. She is constantly repeating, I need to go home. I need to go home. That is like the main driving action, is that she needs to, once this dinner is over, she needs to get back to wherever she lives and she needs to go home. And as the movie progresses, her frustration with that not happening mounts. And I think that's kind of how you feel a little bit as the viewer, like you're a little bit kind of taken captive by it. And there were moments, you know, when they're droning on and on and on in the car where I thought to myself, if this was any other movie, I would turn this off. Like I'm so drained by this conversation. It's so pretentious and just keeps going and going. I've been watching this for 20 minutes, but I was stuck and transfixed. And I think that it bleeds into your brain like that. And again, without giving too much away, I do think it is if you were to ask me what the movie means, I think it's a beautiful portrayal of how trapped one can feel in one's own mind and just sort of being washed around with all the pieces of information one's accumulated over a lifetime, all of the likes and dislikes, and that just coming together in this bodily current that is unsetting and unmooring. And I think it, you know, shows that brilliantly.
Trapped in Charlie Kaufman's mind that's not a fun place to be, but
no.
Since he certainly wants to punish us in the same way. You know, there's a tradition of movies and novels and stuff of going home to meet the parents of one's husband or wife or lover. And this, again, it's like the Einstein version of that. It's that sort of scene squared. It's carried on past the point of discomfort to when it kind of goes off into the ether. But really, what we're looking at is a guy who is ashamed, undermined, weirded out on every level by his parents, and yet feels connected to them in a way that we all do. I mean, it is going home. It is like H.P. Lovecraft. It is like the meteor fell, and you're in the home of these monsters, but you are one of them too. And I think it's the idea of presenting it from the woman's point of view is let's just say it's a fake out. But because as you gradually reassemble the pieces in your mind, you see that, this guy is being eaten alive by his past, by his future, by relationships he's had, by relationships he has not had. And that everything is, as Rebecca said, we are looking at one single consciousness there was a Mario Bava movie retitled in English as Twitch of the Death Nerve. And I see this as a brain, a twitch of the a spasm of the death nerve.
Right. I would love to have been at that branding meeting. What should we call it? This is such a great idea. Just stay with me for a second. So I'll just say one last thing about this, which is, this is a movie that is complicated and challenging and recherché in certain ways. I could also see this movie becoming really popular with the kind of people in the moment that we're in, people of Rebecca Castellani's generation who really enjoy mining something and looking at something and checking out all the references to the poetry of Ava H.D. and the paintings of Ralph Albert Blakelock and there's Wordsworth, and then there's David Foster Wallace, and then there's like a lot of stuff about Oklahoma. And so people who like that kind of stuff, it's not loaded with Easter eggs. It's kind of I don't know what poem. It is
it's like reading T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland or something, where you've got to unpack every single allusion to fully grasp the meaning, but then you also don't.
Right.
Your reaction to the film, it does not have to be predicated on knowing all these allusions. Most of these went over my head, and I only know them because I had to look them up afterwards.
Right.
And I think it rewards the nerdy viewer that wants to dig deeper, but you can also just watch it and get the experience and feel what I think Charlie Kaufman wants you to feel with knowing nothing. So it's not pretentious in that regard. It doesn't require knowledge going into it.
But I could just see it having a life in a certain way with a certain kind of an audience that would really get off on it.
Have either of you read Antkind? Have either of you read Antkind?
No.
No, but I'm really interested after reading the synopsis. It looks
Stream of
fascinating.
Consciousness novel. Well, he's it's really, talk about vertigo. I mean, it's all told from the point of view of a critic. Of a very, very bad, pretentious critic. Although, to be fair, at certain points he splits into many different characters. No spoiler. I couldn't possibly spoil the book. And he seems loosely based on Richard Brody of The New Yorker, who hates Charlie Kaufman and apparently has pretty devastated Charlie Kaufman in his criticisms of his solipsism and white privilege and all the rest. And so, and the thing about the character in this book, the protagonist, is he hates Charlie Kaufman above all. So these rants about Charlie Kaufman. And once again, we see a guy who is really struggling with, who is stuck in his head and does not know any way out except to literally dramatize the forces that are eating at him, the people who hate him.
It's the new metafiction.
Okay, we absolutely have to stop here. But yes, Charlie Kaufman is never very far from Charlie Kaufman's mind in, I think, any of these movies. All right, let's take a break and we'll come back.
So have no fear, come and join me here and eat as much as you please. I will turn your frown fully upside down when you take your very first bite.
All right, and time to say some thank yous, starting with Kat Pastor. She's the person in the studio making the whole thing happen. She just told us not to worry about something off the air. And I realized I never worry about stuff when Kat has it under control. So that's an incredible gift and a bounty. Jonathan McPants is the other person who won't be worrying because Kat is going to take care of whatever it was. But he is the person also who put together this episode, the ideas, the clips, all the stuff that you hear. So thanks to the two of them. Wouldn't be possible without them. With us today, Rebecca Castellani and David Edelstein. We're going to do some recommendations right here. Rebecca, why don't you get us started?
So my friends and I have been talking a lot recently about how we feel like the end of peak TV has happened and we're kind of living in the wake of that now. And I would like to make a pitch to say that we are in the, not maybe the beginning, but somewhat a little bit after that of peak documentary. And I've got two for you that HBO has just recently put out that I just thoroughly enjoyed, and one I'm still enjoying. The first is, no surprise here, All Be Gone in the Dark, the HBO documentary that charts Michelle McNamara's best-selling book, All Be Gone in the Dark, about the catch for the Golden State Killer. And the documentary is just fantastic. It gives you another angle to the story that you didn't really get with the book, which is also fabulous, and I've recommended it a couple times on the show. But the documentary, it's only 6 parts. It's profound. I cried. Patton Oswalt is interviewed extensively. He was the husband of Michelle McNamara. And it's just a fantastic telling of her life and what a wonderful writer she was, and a just incredible story. And the second one is airing currently on HBO, and that is called The Vow, and it is about the NXIVM cult spearheaded by Keith Rainier. This is interesting less in a different way than All Be Gone in the Dark, but it definitely provides some wonderful insight into how somebody joins a cult, not necessarily why, like how somebody can get wrapped up in something that they don't realize is a cult. And NXIVM in particular is interesting to me because it roped in so many actresses from Battlestar Galactica, which remains my favorite television show of all time. So if you're interested in like seeing Nikki from Battlestar Galactica in a completely different light, The Vow is fantastic. It is really interesting. And both, again, are on HBO. So that's All Be Gone in the Dark, which is already aired, and The Vow, which is currently airing.
All right. They didn't get Mary McDonnell. She's too strong for them.
No, of course not.
Of course not. She's the president.
Oh, she started. Actually, you watch this. You might think that Mary McDonnell is Nancy Salzman.
All right. So, David, you got a minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that.
I'm so glad you're talking about the second Battlestar Galactica, not the Lorne Green one.
Oh,
so
God, no. We don't
really
talk about that
one. One of the greatest series ever for television, apart from the last episode, which don't get me started on.
We don't talk about that either.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that I mean, beyond a recommendation, I just want to say today is September 11th, and this is the first September 11th that I can remember where I haven't thought that we are still living in the shadow of September 11th, because something even more shadowy and oppressive has come our way. Actually, many shadows, many oppressive shadows. And so I handle this the way I usually do, by escaping. And so I've just been watching a lot of TV series, foreign, policier detective series. I finally caught up with The Bridge, the Danish-Swedish collaboration, which has become one of my favorite shows. I watched all 4 seasons, and I'm watching now. I'm really excited about this show, British show that's on Showtime called We Hunt Together. It features 2 couples. One of them are serial killers, and one of them are detectives. It's British, on their heels, and they are interracial couples. They are both a high-strung and/or psychotic woman with a relatively centered white woman with a relatively centered black male, and there is a weird symmetry, but there is also you just feel that there's no clear one-to-one relationship between action and psychosis, action and character.
We have to stop right there because the show is over. But I'll just quickly say, if you do wind up watching this movie, I'm thinking of ending things, and you like Jessie Buckley, watch Wild Rose. That was kind of her big debut star turn. She's amazing in it.
She was a real country western singer?
She was a real something. And if you still miss Jessie Buckley, just drive by Carolyn Payne's house or something. I mean, they really are just like almost twins for each other. If you love Jesse Plemons and you've never watched Friday Night Lights, there is some kind of marathon going on some channel right now. But it is just such a smart show about so many different things, including race and sex and, of course, football. Okay, I really have to go. Thanks to David. Thanks to Rebecca.